Good morning, my name is Shannon. I'm the Executive Director of Movement Rights in the United States, and I've been working with communities fighting fracking since, in the United States primarily, since 2007, and I'm also on the steering committee for the national group Stop the Frack Attack Network.
Thank you. And I believe you have some testimony today for the Tribunal with regard to the impacts of fracking on Mother Earth and the rights of Mother Earth.
Yes, thank you. If it's okay, I have some slides I'd like to share.
Please.
Thank you. So I think fracking is best described, it speaks for itself in so many ways. It is one of the most harmful activities created as a modern invention. It is, in fact, a rape of the earth. And since the mid-2000s, it has been spreading like an Ebola virus, really, around the United States and around the country. At the top here, you have, this is a before and after fracking photo. So as much as I can tell you about the process, the photos do speak for itself. This is methane escaping, being burned off into the atmosphere. There are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of these being burned off across the United States and around the world. One of the things I'll be talking about primarily are these fracking ponds. The waste ends up in these sort of lined ponds that you might put your goldfish in, just a plastic liner, and they're toxic and open, and as you can see, they're dangerous. And when the storms come and wash these frack ponds away, which rain is wont to do, it ends up putting all of these toxic chemicals into rivers, streams, lakes, and into our communities. So even though fracking has certainly become more visible on the world stage, for those of you who are not familiar with the process of fracking, what it is, I just want to give a really brief sort of synopsis of them, a very simplified synopsis of the process. It is a process for recovering oil and natural gas, like maybe 2 miles down from the well rig, straight down through the water table, through the soil, down into deep, hard shale. And the idea then is that it can be horizontally, the well rig is horizontal, and millions of gallons of fresh water and toxic chemicals and sand are pumped down in past these well casings into the earth to open and fracture that shale to release quote-unquote trapped oil and natural gas to be brought up and used. So this is what the process looks like. Just a quick history of fracking. We're only going to start about 400 million years ago, so it's going to be a really quick history. But the shale formations we don't always understand how our system works. But there's a reason why shale is down very deep under the earth. So 400 million of years ago, these shales were formed. We only discovered them in the 1940s. We didn't even know they existed, these shale formations. In the 1940s, the other thing is that fracking, many experts say fracking's been done since the 1940s. Well, that's true to the extent that fracking went just down a little bit into the surface, not even to the water table, certainly not into the deep shale. We did not have the technology to do that. And so it was done very briefly and very rare because the technology to really develop and crack open this hard shale was not developed until around 2003 by the Halliburton Corporation. The Halliburton Corporation, of course, which Dick Cheney, who was vice president at the time of the United States, was also a principal of the Halliburton Corporation who developed this technology, and he helped usher in a process through our environmental regulatory agency to say fracking was so safe, it didn't even need to be regulated. It was exempted, actually, from our major environmental laws, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. And this particular thing paved the way for states and communities to become the victims of fracking all across the country, often without the knowledge of those communities, because it was unregulated, because it was unmonitored. Since then, of course, communities and states have been scrambling to sort of identify what the dangers are, but the dangers already exist. And this also paved the way for the profits for the corporations involved in oil and gas exploration to also export this idea of fracking around the world. And today, what we have in a very short period of time is fracking is one of the largest threats to the health of ecosystems worldwide and threats to life on Earth. So, what is, in terms of what happens? So, fracking takes over 1 million active fracking wells exist in the United States just in those last few years. It takes between 2 and 8 million of gallons of fresh water, not dirty water, but fresh water is wet. But millions of gallons of this frac fluid are combined with the fresh water to produce 400 billion gallons of frac fluid in the United States alone per year. Now, what happens to that water? What happens to that water, sand, and toxic chemicals once it's been forced down into the earth to force open the shale? Well, 2/3 of those chemicals are either remain underground and never come back up, or when they do come back up, they have to re-inject them to store them. This means that all of these toxic chemicals are placed either on top or inside the earth, and 1/3 of the chemicals sit in these open air pits that I described to you. Here's some cows who, turns out cows like the briny salt water of the frac fluid, they're attracted to it. So when fracking occurs on farms, this is what happens. And these open air pits are just left available for children, for farming, for the soil. Each well, of course, also brings with it, they don't just magically appear. This is what happens. One of the people who will be giving testimony, Candy Mossa, today, this is her community of just a couple of thousand people, and this is what it looks like every minute of every day now in her community, because it takes 400 tanker trucks per well. Where does fracking take place? Well, as you can see, it takes place anywhere. On farms, on schools, on neighborhoods. It takes place offshore. This is just 200 feet away from this kindergarten, this playground. This is all over the United States. And this air quality, I don't know if you can see this well rig because it's smoggy, because of course with it comes poor air quality, which we'll talk about. So this is how the process is done and what it looks like. So now we get to, well, what does that mean in terms of violations of the rights of Mother Earth? Well, one of the things that is guaranteed is that those well rigs will fail. The casks that are supposed to protect the groundwater, well, they're made of cement, and cement does crack. This is Dr. Anthony Ingrafia, who actually is he's a NASA scientist and an engineer from Cornell University, who has been studying fracking and leaks, and has proven that over 6% of wells fail the very first time they're used. So already, 6% of the water supply is placed at risk immediately. And over time, 60% will fail over 20 years, and eventually they'll all fail. In California, where I live, where we have a drought, maybe you've heard about the worst drought that we have in our state's history, the farmers are being sold frac water to irrigate the crops. California, of course, produces 50% of the entire fruits and vegetables for the United States and 20% of world supply as well. So this is what anything you get from California is being grown in frack water. This is the frack water. This is the fracking wastewater that's being sold to farmers. There have been over 1,000 cases of proven water contamination. Those are just the ones that they can prove are related to fracking. Many, many more happen, as we'll hear today. Some of that water is radioactive. In some places, it's 3,600 times the federal limit for water, the radioactivity allowed for water. And as you can see, all of these fracking chemicals, once they leach into the water, they're just deadly. This is, when we talk about methane leaks into the water system, this is what a lot of people find, that the water coming out of their tap is actually flammable. This has become, over the last few years, this used to be shocking to people. It's really no longer shocking. Fracking also violates the rights of air and climate. We have an expert who's going to talk a little bit more about this, but just to mention. So we have that leakage of methane that I've talked about. Methane, which is a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Those fracking ponds, and here's some, this is from Utah. As you can see, this is not clean water. It looks more like an artist's paint set. And these open ponds. And they just sit in these open ponds and release volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, in this off-gassing, which creates smog, which creates air pollution, and which also contributes to climate change. It also contributes to cancer and asthma. This, of course, again, these are the people, these are the workmen working on this well site. Look at them in comparison to the size of this flame. This is happening all across the country where they're just releasing this methane. And these are some of the chemicals that cause cancer, that they've proven to cause cancer, as well as many other health effects. And people and communities, animals, are becoming very, very sick. Fracking is also a violation of the rights of soil, the rights of the earth, the sites for life. Fracking causes earthquake. I'd like Candy Mossett, if you could stand for me in the audience. I'm sorry, Candy. Casey Camp Hornick. Close. I'm so sorry. She spoke yesterday in the opening ceremony, and she was also testified last year. Actually, if you could come up and join me. Testified last year in this case before this tribunal about what happens in her community of Oklahoma, which is now the earthquake capital of the world. Since she has testified in the past. I wanted to bring that forward. And just to go through a few things, you all can also see where the animals have died, the cows have died. That list of in the middle there, they're called fraccidents. Because the fracking is dangerous enough when it's done legally, but of course it's never done perfectly. And the fact is that we're taking what's happening in the United States and we're exporting it around the world. This is a map of unconventional oil drilling over time. So as you can see, really small percentages in 1990, and soon it's going to overtake fracking and the like will be overtaking conventional drilling. This is what they're considering the way of the future. And in the map on this side, you can see that it's not just a problem in the United States, and this will hear testimony from around the world today. This is something that's being exported over the last few years around the world. Fracking is one of the most dangerous and vile activities, creations for oil exploration that has been ever invented, ever thought of. It is a rape and a violation of the rights of Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Briefly, if you don't mind, may I say a few words?
I know we have a question from the judges, and I would be very much interested to see if that would, you could respond to that question with your statement. Thank you. Yes? Okay, thank you. She first.
Thank you. And thank you, judges. Thank you for allowing me, Shannon, to say a few words. I live in an area of Oklahoma where fracking has become an institution. There are 13,000 active wells there going on, and each one of them has an injection wells. Since 2008, when there was 5 earthquakes in Oklahoma that were under 1 to 1.5, we have escalated on a yearly basis until this year, in 1 year, we have had over 5,000 earthquakes. All of a magnitude 2.5 up to a magnitude 5.7 that happened there 3 years ago now. 3 days before I came to Paris, there was one of 4.7. All of these earthquakes that are happening there are directly related to the injection wells. The Corporation Commission of Oklahoma is manned by oil people, and so they continue to allow this to happen. And what is happening as a result of that is beyond devastation for our people in that area. There are 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma, and each one of us have a love of the land and the water and the air. And each one of us are suffering from having the aquifers beneath our territories being defiled. Each one of us are having fish kills in our lakes and in our ponds. Last year, the Salt Fork River that ran through our territory had 5 fish kills directly related to the injection wells and the poisons that go inside there. So those are the same waters that our people fish in. That runs through the grounds where we have our annual gatherings, where in the past we've shared food and dance and joy. It's where our children play in the sands and the sides of the Salt Fork. It's where our men folks fish and bring home food for us. And we get no warnings, you know, the EPA or the federal government there, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, none of those tell us the things that Shannon is telling us here. So our babies are still playing in that, you know. We're still fishing and eating down there. The deer are still grazing and swimming in that, the beaver, the relatives that come to stay among us in the winters and the summers when they're migrating, live in those waters. So we know firsthand that when you grind into the bones of the mother, that she begins to shake and shudder with pain and with the reality that she has to find a way to live with her waters being shifted and poisoned and killed, and with the advent of men being able to shake from her and pressure from her those things. All of these earthquakes measure between 1 and 2 miles under the earth, and that makes them about 100 times more violent than those earthquakes that happen in California that are 40, 50 miles under the earth. When they're on the surface like that, they shake everything. So we have a first-hand understanding of the death and destruction caused by fracking, not only to our Mother Earth, to us, her children, and to the relatives that we all love and who love us. And we ask you to allow the world to understand. We go on. So.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and my heart goes out to you and to Candy and other communities that are being impacted so horribly by fracking. It's absolutely devastating, and so thank you for your comments. I just wanted to take this minute because I don't think Shannon Biggs will be on stage again. I don't know the rest of the time here. to say also that, you know, we're here in a tribunal around rights of nature, and I want people to know this is not theoretical. Earlier this year, Shannon Biggs was part of a case in Mendocino County, California, and they actually created a local ordinance to stop fracking in the community. And so I really just wanted to acknowledge Shannon for that, and also to let people know that this is a real tool, a legal tool that can stop fracking in your community using local ordinances around rights of nature. And hopefully this work can also continue with other communities. I don't know if you wanted to make a quick comment about that, Shannon.
Yes, just to say, rights of nature has, as a law and localities, dozens and 24 communities have passed ordinances that recognize the rights of ecosystems to not be fracked in the United States. So this is not just theoretical. Rights of nature is a tool for stopping this destruction. And that's the work that I do around the United States. And thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Following the lead of what Shannon did here, and I want to just say this quickly, we have a myriad of pipelines underneath Oklahoma. Everybody knows that's the pipeline capital of the world. And these earthquakes are also shaking up all of the pipelines to a degree that we're all sitting on bombs there, you know. But the other thing is that the state of Oklahoma has banned us from making those policies in our municipalities. But within the indigenous nations, we have asserted our sovereignty in our northern portion of Oklahoma. And the Pawnee Nation is the first nation there to pass a moratorium on fracking and injection wells. And the Ponca, the Tonkawa, the Kaw, and the Osage are following that lead. Thanks to Shannon.